All right, friends, welcome. So nice to see everybody. If you haven't already, please introduce yourself in the chat. One thing making you proud this week, as well as who you are. So I think I'm saying this right, Shaylee. It's her birthday week, so happy birthday, Shaylee. A lot of amazing things happening. Sarah with the United Network for Organ Sharing has reached a new milestone of 1 million transplants in the United States, which undoubtedly has saved just numerous lives. Pretty exciting from that. Sam's twin boys started high school. ANRF is a growing team. A lot of good things. Mike ended up his fiscal year with more than $150,000 in surplus, which is awesome. Elizabeth from Louisville had a bunch of personal growth. A lot of other good things. KT from Dayton Art Institute, proud to be close to hitting goals this year. I'm so excited to be heading to Dayton in 2 weeks for a wedding. Jake's proud that he made it to today, which is great. Sherry got her booster and flu shot. And Richard, maybe wrapping up with Richard, United Way of Greater Newark in Jersey, finished his first week at United Way. So congratulations to you. Really, really, really excited. All right, well, let's dive in today. We are very happy to be talking about cryptocurrency, NFTs, the blockchain, and what it means for philanthropy. And our goal here is to make all of this as clear as humanly possible. There's a lot of complexity. We could go into it. We're going to skip a lot of the complexity and make sure we can talk about what really matters and what matters for giving and for folks in modern fundraising. As you might know, this session, like many of them, is good for 1.0 CFRE credits. So my colleague June put this together. Thank you, June. I know she's on the call and did a bunch of hard work to make sure that you can get professional certification here. So the way to get this is at the end of the session, there will be a brief survey. Just make a note, make sure your name is in there, and that way we can back you up if you ever get audited. So today's agenda, pretty straightforward. We'll talk about some major macro trends in crypto and NFT philanthropy. We'll talk about how to actually secure these gifts, then we'll just do some Q&A. So pretty straightforward. Feel free to settle in. Most importantly, we'll send the recording and the slides around after the fact. So for instance, if you have a boss that you are trying to convince to get into NFT philanthropy or crypto philanthropy, or a board member who's really curious and just wants to learn more, this is a pretty good resource for you to share later. Okay, so some quick introductions. My name is Patrick. I've met a lot of you in person or online. Lucky to be the co-founder and co-CEO of FreeWill alongside my wonderful co-founder, Jenny. We are delighted to work alongside a team that is smart, tenacious, kind, really quite lovely. More than 200 folks, closing in on $7 billion raised and committed to charity, which we're super excited about, between bequests and stocks and crypto, some other things like that. And then one last thing before we get started is we really like to thank you for joining. We know it's free, but we know an hour of your time is not free. And so really important. As we think about crypto and sort of the underlying dynamics of crypto, we wanted to share a book by Benjamin Graham. Now, Benjamin Graham for a long time was one of the leading professors of finance at Columbia, largely thought of as one of the leading financial minds in American history. So this book is quite old. I think it was written in the 40s. I could be wrong here. But we'll give it to 20 folks as a gift. It's really valuable in terms of thinking about how investing works, what makes a good investment, what makes a bad investment, and thinking about value investing. So make a note in the survey. We know this is pretty different than things we've done, but we know a lot of folks are sort of curious about investment strategy, both for yourself, but also thinking in the minds of your donors, who are many of those who will be big time investors. And so it's a surprisingly readable book. Don't be confused by the lack of a picture on the cover. So make a note in the survey. Also, make sure you have your address. Sometimes people fill out the survey, they don't put their address in. Very difficult for us to send books by going through the white pages trying to find you. So do that. We'll give it to 20 folks as a gift. All right, so diving in a bit more, some interesting things to see here. Overall mood, excuse me. Overall mood, just a bit down from last week, a little bit of increase in anxiety. Maybe that's just sort of coming out of summer, going into fall. I'm really curious if people have thoughts on what might have driven that. Now, on the flip side, look at this. I mean, for a while, people were really, feeling good about hitting their goals. And then we went into this dip in the summer. Again, this graph is on a 4.0 to 3.5 curve, so it's not it may overstate it a little bit, but look at this swing back up over the last month or so. And so really encouraging as people are thinking about being thoughtful about end of year, putting the right strategy into place, hopefully seeing some early results that really we're on an upswing collectively as a community in terms of how bullish we're feeling about hitting goals this year. So that's really, really exciting to see. All right, so let's dive into it. So we're going to talk about crypto and NFT philanthropy. We'll start with making sure we have a shared understanding of what crypto is. We'll talk about blockchain, we'll talk about NFTs, and then we'll dive into some real strategies. So when we asked you all, how confident are you in your crypto knowledge? About a third of folks said there were 1, a quarter said there were 2, another quarter said there were 3, and then it gets a really small percentage of 4s and 5s. Now, one thing that's interesting is when we look back at doing this, say, a year ago, these numbers are actually dramatically better, right? A year ago, we would have saw 60, 70% of people say I'm a 1. And so you're starting to see fundraisers getting smarter about this, reflected in many of these scores. It's really interesting to see. NFT knowledge is a little bit more where we were on all of crypto a year ago. So you see 55% say I'm a 1, 0% said I'm a 5. It's really remarkable. Given the number of respondents here. And then you see, 2, 3, 4, a couple folks each. So interesting to see, and we'll dive a little bit into NFTs today to make sure you're a little bit more comfortable there. And by the end of the call, you're not going to be a 5, but you might be a 3, 2.5 at least if you started as a 1. Also in January of this year, right? So now, I guess 9 months ago, we asked folks, do you currently accept crypto? 21% said yes, 34% said no, not planning to. 32% said it's a priority this year. A bunch of folks didn't know. When we look at sort of current results from September 2022, you can see here 40% of you all already, 40% of nonprofits surveyed already take crypto donations, right? So if that's you, awesome. We'll talk more about how to get more of those. If it's not you, we'll sort of walk through some easy ways to get started. A third say no plans to do so this year, but another 27% say we hope to have a solution before end of year. So what you're looking at is potentially by the end of 2022, right, 3-4 months away, 2/3 of charities, at least in this survey set, taking crypto, which is really interesting to see. So let's demystify crypto and NFTs. It can feel sort of like this weird future nonsense, and we'll just break it down for you in hopefully a pretty accessible way. So what is crypto? There are 3 big concepts for us to understand today, particularly as it relates to crypto. There's obviously a bunch more as it relates to crypto fundraising. So what is cryptocurrency? What is the blockchain? You'll hear the word blockchain thrown around a lot. And what are NFTs, which you've heard in the news and other things like that. So let's just start about cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency is, you can think of it as digital currency. You can't hold it, right? There's nothing here, but you can have a digital account that has stuff in it. There are more than 16,000 cryptocurrencies. So in the same way that there's lots of currencies in the world, the peso, the Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar, the lira, the Swiss franc, right? All these are different currencies that can sort of tie together. There are more than 16,000 cryptocurrencies because people can build them themselves. Now, important to know that most of these are worthless, right? So Bitcoin, which has a $415 billion market cap, and Ethereum, which has a $217 billion market cap, are the most popular. Now, just to make sure we're all aligned here, what is a market cap? A market cap is a term often used in stocks, it can also be used in currencies, is if you put it all together, right? You just got all the Bitcoin in one account, how much would it be? And so there's $415 billion of Bitcoin in the world. There's $217 billion of Ethereum in the world at current valuations. Only 50 of these coins have market caps of more than $1 billion. And so that's a good threshold for, potentially do they matter? The total market capitalization of all cryptocurrencies is about $1 trillion. So another way to think about that is Bitcoin is 41% of all crypto. Ethereum is 22% of all crypto. Another 50 make up basically the rest. And then there's a very long tail. So total market capitalization of $1 trillion. How much is $1 trillion in market cap? Total US dollars, right? If we went around as a group and robbed everybody and all the banks and took all the hard dollars, right? Not all the sort of IRA accounts and things like that, but all of the paper dollars, put them in a giant building, we would have about $2 trillion. So Bitcoin's about half of that in terms of half of all the hard cash in circulation in the US and outside the US, but US, US dollars in circulation gives you a little bit of a sense there. The other way to think about crypto is it's sort of similar to gold, right? People can digitally mine it. We won't talk too much about mining today, but it takes a lot of computational power. The way gold takes a lot of physical effort to mine. You can buy it. You can then trade it as an asset, as a form of currency, right? Lots of parts of the world, you can still trade gold for stuff, or you can trade gold for currency and trade currency for things. And it has value because people place value on it, right? I mean, there are metals that are actually, objectively prettier than gold, right? There are things that are more useful for building than gold. And yet we collectively as a society have decided that gold is quite valuable. Like gold, there's a limited number of coins, so the value fluctuates from supply and demand, right? So you can invest in gold, you can also use it, things like that. Bitcoin, which again is sort of the largest one, you can see this is the price change over time. So it's very volatile, and it's down from its sort of peak in late 2021, but it's still up, 760% over the last few years. You can see how that tracks with the S&P 500, which is up 73% over that period. Also, pretty good return, 1/10 the return of Bitcoin if you were an early Bitcoin investor. Pretty interesting to see. So that's what cryptocurrency is, right? And we'll come back to Ethereum in a second because it's really important. Bitcoin gets more news. Ethereum is actually probably more important for fundraising, and we'll talk about why. So cryptocurrency or digital currency exists on what's called the blockchain. Now, many of you have heard this. Some of you will know what it is. Some of you will just have heard it in the news a bunch and said, what is that? Where does that exist? What does it mean? Here's the simplest way to understand the blockchain. And if you're explaining this to your friends who are totally clueless, what is crypto? What is the blockchain? Here's the way to think about it. Think of the blockchain as a simple bank ledger, right? So if I send Jenny $100, I bank at Wells Fargo. Probably shouldn't, but I do. And it's annoying to sort of switch off of that. We keep a record of, Wells Fargo keeps a record of that transaction, and now shows $100 less in my account and $100 more in Jenny's, right? It's a simple bank ledger. If Jenny then, sends it to Sarah, so it shows, the transaction went from Patrick to Jenny to Sarah, and that's where the $100 goes. It's another way of storing data, typically transactional data, right? So it's very useful. All banks have ledgers, right? And most companies have ledgers of these things as well. Now, the blockchain is similar to a bank in that it's got this full ledger, but it's decentralized and it's fully public so that everyone has a copy and can participate, right? And so that's sort of the big innovation of blockchain, that everyone sees the ledger, and that way you sort of have proof of ownership in different areas. And so if I send Jenny $100 in Bitcoin, and then Jenny sends it to Sarah, all of those transactions are traceable in public, right? So we can all agree to that. Each block represents a series of transactions, and when combined or chained, they show a list, another chain of all transactions ever made, right? So it's a chain of blocks, right? That's where the blockchain comes from, its etymology here. Everyone knows everything. Nothing is left out for most crypto, meaning this is all public, it's all searchable. The big thing to note here is that the accounts are public, but the owners aren't necessarily public, right? So in this example, whereas the bank knows Patrick sent it to Jenny, Jenny sent it to Sarah, the blockchain knows it went to this wallet address and then went to that wallet address and that wallet address. And I might have special passwords to access my wallet. So that's just a little bit more there. So basics of crypto, basics of blockchain. What are NFTs and why are NFTs new? NFTs, which is an acronym for non-fungible tokens, are unique cryptographic tokens that exist on a blockchain. Okay, actually, I think someone can correct me here. I think it's actually not an acronym, because an acronym you have to say it all at once, like NASA or SCUBA. So it's a set of initials that stand for non-fungible tokens, and in the ownership of these. Right? These things don't actually exist on the blockchain, but the record of ownership lives on the blockchain. Non-fungible tokens are in contrast to fungible tokens, like Bitcoin. One Bitcoin is the same as another Bitcoin. Doesn't matter which one I have, right? In the US, you think of a dollar bill for the most part, the same as any other dollar bill. Non-fungible tokens are unique. you can have the Mona Lisa. You can't swap it for another Mona Lisa. It's not the Mona Lisa. You can have a print of the Mona Lisa. It's not the Mona Lisa. And so these are unique things, right? Many NFTs are art, but some are also other types of collectibles. We'll talk about that, particularly with basketball in a moment. And so this is really interesting. And the ledger, right, this sort of blockchain ledger records and verifies the transaction. So sometimes people talk about it as a contract. It proves you own something. Ownership, art, right, how cool the art is, the scarcity of it, all combine to give NFTs their value. Now, in some ways, you might say, hey, why does anyone care about these? Well, it's another thing where we as a society have collectively assigned value, right? There was a Mickey Mantle baseball card that sold, I think, last week for about $12 million. I don't know the exact amount, but it's just a piece of cardboard that inherently has very little value, right? It doesn't have a lot of use, but the scarcity, the story behind it, the rarity, all that combined to make this Mickey Mantle rookie card worth $12 million. And so, you can sort of, doesn't have to be for you, but we can begin to understand why different collections have value. They're typically bought and sold on marketplaces. OpenSea is, this is the address for OpenSea. It's one of the largest, very recently founded, very large company to date. And also artists can contribute a percentage of the initial sale and future sales on what are called smart contracts. So this is really interesting. It sort of hasn't necessarily taken off in philanthropy yet, but we may be talking about this in 2 years, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But basically what you can do is you can program royalties every time an NFT is sold. So let's say for a moment that I buy Monet is probably not a good example because Monet is not currently alive, but I buy a really wonderful photograph in an art store from a photographer. I might be thrilled to buy it for $500. That photographer gets super famous. Suddenly that's worth, $500,000. That photographer sees no value of the resale. In these smart contracts, what it may say is the artist says, every time it's sold, I get 10% of the proceeds for the sale. And so as these things grow in value, the smart contract continues to add value to the artist, which, for some people is very appealing. You can also use smart contracts for things like every time this gets sold, 10% goes to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, right? Or the Susan G. Komen, or the Nature Conservatory. So all these things. So you might get 5% of the proceeds every time a piece is sold forever, right? That's possible as well. So some interesting things in NFTs. Just going a little bit deeper in NFTs, and we added some slides at the last minute here because we wanted to really sort of help people understand these, given how low the scores in the survey were. So we're going to talk about bored apes, right? So look at this picture. These are apes who are looking bored. Originally, 10,000 of these, their individual graphics, were made in April 2021. They're each unique, right? So there's a whole bunch of different attributes, and they all sort of flow together to make sure that each ape is one of a kind. You can see the background color, the eye shape, how the tongue is positioned, whether or not they have a cigarette, whether they're smiling, things like that. To date, more than $1 billion has been spent on bored apes. And celebrities like Madonna and Neymar, one of the top soccer players in the world, Snoop Dogg, have all purchased these. Bored apes also have attributes of some other NFTs. Owners get the intellectual property of the image, meaning once I do this and a movie wants to put a bored ape in it, I could sell that. Owners get exclusive online communities, some in-person events, things like that. So it's sort of become this like interesting collectible, but it's also an example that feels just totally absurd to the outside world, right? It's just a picture of ape. I think one of the I don't know the highest price, but several of them have gone for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So super interesting there. The other thing to see is NBA Top Shot. In 2020, the NBA started minting moments that fans could own as collectibles, right? So basically they created these scarce collectibles on the blockchain for NFTs. And now more than $1 billion has been transacted in these, in Top Shot NFTs, with the most expensive being a $200,000 purchase of a dunk by LeBron James, meaning the NBA just created this collectible digital art. Looks like this. It's called the Cosmic Dunk. and someone bought it for $200,000 and it's been resold, I believe. And so the collector community has decided that this has value. It's really interesting. Other leagues, I know baseball has one. Similar entities are trying to follow suit here. So there's some interesting stuff to see. So that's a little bit about crypto, a little bit about the blockchain, a little bit about NFTs. Let's dive deeper now into what that all means for philanthropy. So crypto donor demographics. A couple things to know. Who are these people who are giving crypto, who are owning crypto? Well, the per capita annual household income for crypto users is $111,000. The average age is about 38. 2/3 of folks identify as men in terms of crypto owners, but in 2015, this was 90%. So you're starting to see a huge directional shift. My guess is it's going to be close to 55-45 in a couple of years. The average crypto donation is about $7,000. Now that's a pretty big deal, right? Because go look at that per capita annual household income. 111,000, this is a big deal. It's higher than the average online cash donation by a massive amount. So you start to see some threads here. Anytime we can get someone to donate crypto instead of cash, the likelihood is that that donation is going to be way, way higher. 45% of crypto users donate at least $1,000 to charity each year, which is compared to only 1/3 of general investor population donates more than 1,000. So you see a younger, relatively wealthy, altruistic community here giving a whole bunch of money, right? So you're starting to see some themes here. Thank you, Gemini and Fidelity Charitable, for some of this research. And we've done a lot of in-house research, right? We sit down with crypto donors and say, tell us about why you're giving. How do you make decisions? What does this look like? And when we talk to donors, 3 reasons emerge, right? They're not going to be wildly surprising to you. 1, altruism. I just care about this cause. I want to give. 2, there's a lot of tax benefits to giving appreciated crypto. I'll talk more about those in a second, but it's important that we have our heads around those. Or 3, they promise as an NFT artist to give a portion of the sale to nonprofit organizations. So those are the 3 big reasons. A couple major defining psychographic, which is going to make these different. They're not necessarily looking for an active phone conversation with you, right? They're sort of a little bit happier to be background givers. And so that's an interesting area to explore. They often won't reply to emails or phone calls, which can be frustrating, but it's also nice to get these big gifts in. A couple other things. Talking about tax minimization. So crypto is virtual currency and treated as property. So we're going to talk more about this in a second, but there's some really important things to know here. The same way that if you give a boat to your organization, crypto is going to be treated with the same tax view. So the IRS says general tax principles applicable to property transactions apply to transactions of virtual currency. When you sell virtual currency, you must recognize any capital gain or loss on the sale, subject to any limitations on the deductibility of capital losses, right? So the same things that apply to stock here or some property apply. Crypto holders may be responsible for capital gains. So this is really important to know. It also makes it a really good reason to give this stuff away. So you can see here, we've talked about Bitcoin and Ethereum, a lot of spikes and valleys, but also huge growth over the long term. I mean, just, volatility plus very high growth. So Bitcoin up 10,000% all time, Ethereum up 15,000% all time, pretty jaw-dropping stuff. So don't let recent news around market swings deter you. Crypto has grown a ton in value, as we talked about. So if you're a crypto donor, you're thinking about avoiding capital gains taxes, deducting the full value of the gift. And so giving appreciated crypto, meaning for more than a year, is almost always better for a donor than giving cash, almost always, right? In the same way that giving appreciated stock, almost always better for a donor. And by the way, these gifts are going to be much larger, right? This is a little wonky, so if it doesn't make sense to you, feel free to just sort of let it slide. But if you own crypto and you owe a whole bunch of capital gains taxes, but you still believe in the future of crypto, you can give away your current crypto, buy it back at exactly the same price, and then you've wiped out all the capital gains to that point. So there's some interesting financial situations that will unfold. If you're a nonprofit, what's the big value? You get a really big gift, right? It's going to be bigger than the cash gift you would have gotten from exactly the same person. It also allows you to access, younger donors in a different way. So let's talk about some crypto donations, some big trends in crypto donations. First of all, the annual volume of crypto donations is going wildly up. 4 million in 2020, 70 million in 2021, potentially much larger than that. This is sort of direct crypto donations. We'll talk more about DAFs in a second. Average donations gone from 3,000 to 10,000 in 1 year. I mean, no other part of philanthropy sees this rise. On average, nonprofits accepting crypto received 70,000 in crypto donations in 2021. Is an increase of 66% from 2020. This is all from the Nonprofit Times. So thanks to our friends over there. Fidelity Charitable, right, country's largest DAF, saw that it accepted 28 million in crypto, more than doubling in 2019, but then 160 million in 2021, right? So this is like a 5+ times increase in giving. So you'd expect these trends to continue. And then the other interesting thing, and I know that there's a lot of talk about sort of responsibility of crypto and all that stuff, and it's worth getting informed there, right? So these are important decisions. But Ethereum, more than Bitcoin, is the cryptocurrency with the highest donation volume. And so when people think about crypto, they often think about Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, to its core, I believe, is by far the most energy-intensive crypto unit. So Ethereum has traditionally used only 10% of the energy of Bitcoin, but that's still a lot of energy. There's something happening right now. It's called the merge to Ethereum 2.0. You don't need to know how it happens. You don't need to know a ton about it. But Ethereum is changing the way it operates, its fundamental core, because it never expected to be this big, right? It's just a sort of a small project that blew up. And so now it has a lot of energy usage. And the shift in Ethereum is going to cut its current energy usage by 99.5%. Another way to say this is that Ethereum, in about a month, will take about 1/200th of the energy that it's currently using. Now, it's already only 10% of Bitcoin, so now we're looking at 1/2000th of the energy of Bitcoin. And suddenly, a lot of the energy concerns around crypto, because donations are focused on Ethereum, not Bitcoin, are coming away, right? So just wanted to name that because it's been a huge point of conversation. And this merge is underreported. And most people don't know that Ethereum outstrips Bitcoin as the #1 type of crypto donation. So another big point. Trend 2, we're really seeing the emergence of NFT philanthropies. So sales of NFTs reached $25 billion in 2021. And even when crypto markets dip, transactions continue to increase. This is vastly underreported, by the way. A lot of the crypto donation numbers we think are vastly underreported. More than 13 million was donated from verifiable NFT projects. 29% of crypto owners said they purchased crypto to buy NFTs, so you're seeing more and more of that. 35% of crypto investors own NFTs, so there's some shift there, up from 21% in 2021. And so some interesting data there. Here's an example. There's a great organization called Trees for the Future, and they teamed up with a artist collective called Woodies, and they raised a whole bunch of money to plant 830,000 trees, which is pretty cool. And so you can check that out as well. They raised 74 ETH this way, that's $74,000, which is obviously super meaningful for a smaller nonprofit. All right, in late 2021, early 2022, UNICEF released a series of 1,000 NFTs to celebrate their 75th anniversary, and they raised about $400,000 in that, so pretty exciting. Trend 3, millennials continue to dominate crypto philanthropy. So millennials invest in crypto and are more inclined to charity. 90% of millennials say charitable giving is an important part of their life, compared to about 74% of the total population. More than 1 in 3 young investors currently owns crypto, and nearly half of millennials say they're knowledgeable about crypto, compared to about 18% of all folks. Right? So one thing that's becoming clear is that the path to major giving from millennials doesn't only run through crypto, but it will be hard to be successful without some crypto strategy. We're seeing, obviously, a huge shift towards the mainstreaming of crypto. At least 1 in 5 Americans have invested in crypto. 41% of Americans who have never bought crypto say they're likely to buy it in the next year. Right? So this huge shifts in American behavior. The majority of people view owning crypto as an investment as opposed to a payment structure. 52% of crypto investors also hold stock. So you really want to think about this alongside your stock strategy as we're making sure we're sort of helping people give in the smartest way. This is all thanks to a CNBC survey. The number of crypto donations, the orgs, nonprofit orgs accepting crypto grew 10x from 2020 to 2021. We're obviously seeing huge growth again this year. That's super interesting. And then one fifth trend here is that cause funds, right? So a lot of donors are newer to philanthropy, and so will often be more attached to a cause than a organization. And so what we're seeing is a lot of folks are opting to donate to cause-related funds that then distribute amongst a bunch of charities. So that's super important. And then the last thing to note is that year-end is a really big month for crypto donations. About a third of all crypto donations in 2021 happened in December. This mirrors what we see in cash giving and sort of all the normal giving patterns around how it's all really focused end of year. Half of total 2021 annual donation volume was in November and December. So what does it mean? If you're going to do it now, get ready for end of year. One thing I wanted to add on trends that we didn't really put in here before we move on is we talked about this a little bit in the past, but many of you have heard us talk about the great wealth transfer. So over the next 20-ish years, as baby boomers age, they will pass $70 trillion on to millennials and Gen Z and Gen X. And when we look at millennial millionaires, something like more than half of them have more than half of their wealth in crypto, which on its own is just a stunning statistic. That was from a CNBC poll. The other thing to know, when we think about millennial millionaires, it's easy to think finance, it's easy to think tech. It's actually more than half of it is inheritance, right? Baby boomers are just the enormously wealthy generation. And as that money gets passed on to younger generations, a ton of that inheritance is being invested in crypto, for better or worse, right? But it tends to be a thing that happens to be true. And so that becomes a really big source of giving and investing going forward. And as we move along the great wealth transfer and planned giving, which is probably by far the most important type of giving over the next 15 years, it's going to be massively important for your organizations. The echo of that is that the money that's not being left to charity is being left to younger people. Those younger people are putting into crypto. And so crypto is becoming more important because of the great wealth transfer. So all these sort of demographic and historical trends are really piecing together in an interesting way. I'm glad we could talk about it at least a little bit. All right, so how do we actually get some gifts here? We know it matters. We know the waves are coming. Some of the waves are already here. How do we actually make use of it? And it turns out it's not that hard, right? So 20% of Americans, by the way, that 20% is going to bleed a little bit upper income. You have crypto owners in your database right now, right? Unless your donors are exclusively 65, 70 plus, you'll have some. And by the way, the fastest growing demographic of crypto owners is folks over 65. So you want to make sure that donors know your organization welcomes their generosity. They want to know that, the benefits of donating crypto. You can save on capital gains. You can get a full income tax deduction, all these things. We find this to be particularly important because unlike cash donors, 38% of crypto owners say they don't realize that selling digital tax assets is taxable. 30% don't know if crypto can be donated to charities. 56% who said they donated cited my crypto appreciated significantly as the reason for charitable giving. 54% said tax benefits are a reason I give, right? So the more we can share these messages, the more giving you'll see. What else? When we look at people who are most likely to own crypto, you want to be reaching out to your major donors. Increasingly, your 40, 50-year-old, even early 60s major donors, especially those that work in finance or tech, are likely to have some crypto. You can use Twitter and email to make sure you're engaging with younger donors. Pretty simple. Second is making sure this is easy. So let's say that you are actively fundraising, which you are, and you're sending emails about all the important work you're doing. What we find is that 50% of those who made crypto donations said it was hard to find charities that would accept crypto donations. So you want to make it clear in the email, or at least on your donate page, that you take crypto. Doesn't have to be a huge effort, but just making sure that that is there when people are going to give anyway can generate a lot more gifts. About 40% said it was a cumbersome process to donate. Obviously, we know from all of fundraising that easy really, really matters. So you want this on your website before year end. Super easy there. So you want it on your website. We mentioned this already, your ways to give page. PS and fundraising emails doesn't hurt, just as an FYI. If you have your own wallet, you've set it up, which is pretty rare, but a couple of you will have done this, make sure you're capturing donor info and you're not just getting anonymous gifts all the time. This way you can make sure that you're following up with these folks, sending thank yous, sending tax receipts, things like that. Here's a little bit of language you can use. A couple of good examples from your peers. This is what OSearch does. They do great research on the ocean, as you can imagine. It just has it on their Ways to Give page. Our friends over at Awesome Pets Alive have this page, super handy. So generally, not that hard to get up and running. You want to make sure you have it. Strategy 3 here. This is important, right? We just talked about how this is an extremely volatile asset, right? You saw the graphs. No stock market graphs looks like that. Most nonprofits prefer to immediately sell crypto donations for cash and put those cash either into your endowment or your programmatic efforts right away. It is by far the least risky way to handle donations. It prevents discrepancies between the amount donated and the amount actually received. And so you want to have a plan to auto-liquidate to US dollars. Strategy 4, super important. A lot of organizations are getting this wrong. So the IRS, as we said earlier, treats crypto like property, different set of rules than stock. If a nonprofit sells donated property, like crypto, within 3 years, and remember, you're selling it immediately, so that's within 3 years, you must file Form 8282 at the IRS within about 4 months of sale. The form is signed by an officer of your organization, and that means your president, your CFO, something like that. And the penalty for not filing is not very high, but you don't want to be the folks who get fined by the IRS. You don't want to be the person who gets your org fined by the IRS. And this is generally true for all donations valued over $500, right? So that's true for a big clothing drop, a boat, a car, real estate, et cetera. But people forget this about crypto because it feels like stock, right? We know how much everything costs at a moment's notice. If a gift is over $5,000, nonprofit must sign Form 8283 for the donor. You don't need to attest to the value. You just say, we received 3 Bitcoin, right? We received X Ethereum, whatever. Many nonprofits are not currently doing this because they're thinking of it like stock or they're just taking the gifts. And so it's important to get right. We'll talk a bit about how you can get that right in a second. But you just want to make sure that's front of mind as you take these gifts. Strategy 5, it's worth dipping your toes into NFT philanthropy. And the way to do this, keep an eye out for NFT projects that align with your mission. As an example, this link will be in the slides. Happy Campers NFTs are giving back to outdoor nonprofits. And if you have artists in your network, you want to reach out to them about NFTs. But most of you won't. So how will you do that? Well, if you're locally focused nonprofit, right? Let's say we're in Detroit. We're a Detroit-focused nonprofit. We're doing really great work in the city. Just consider looking around for Detroit NFT artists. It may be worth a simple conversation, and you just ask for advice. Say, hey, we're thinking about NFT philanthropy. What have you seen? What would make you interested in partnering on something? How does that work? Or if you're more of an interest-based, sort of broader, you might want to say, let's go look for NFT artists that have similar interests or values. So if you see someone doing a lot of animal NFTs, you may have natural tie-ins with conservation or animal rights group, right? Some folks with the Bored Apes donate them to ape conservations, even though that may not have been their earlier passion project. So interesting to see there. Twitter is a really good way to reach out to these artists. How are we going to find them, right? So how do we actually find these artists? It's hard to just Google animal NFTs. Go to some of the following platforms and just go poke around and click around and explore. It's going to feel pretty foreign at first, but you'll get a hang of it. OpenSea, Magic Eden, Super Rare, Art Blocks, all of these are platforms that are either generating or launching or reselling NFTs. And so go take a look and see, which NFTs are selling for a lot. Who are those artists? Many of those artists will just link to their personal Twitter handles or their websites, and then their websites will have their Twitter handles or their email, right? These folks are open to being contacted. And it's worth just reaching out to a few and say, hey, can we have a quick conversation? Have you ever thought about doing something charitably? What's important to you? Is it this? And go ask to meet them, right? Have a 20-minute phone call. And you'll find it fascinating, I'm sure. You'll probably find it enjoyable. They'll find it fascinating because they're newer to philanthropy. And you might say, well, if you're ever doing this and you want to think about putting 20% of the, what we call a drop, right? 20% of the sort of launch into charity, that would be great. or maybe donating all of it to charity, or donating all of a couple pieces to charity, right? That these 3 pieces, the whole funds will go to charity. And so that's interesting. It's also important that you're taking this route, because we want to see, we want to work with the artists who are actually producing, valuable stuff. There's a lot of NFTs that are totally worthless, right? The same way there's a lot of baseball cards or postage stamps that basically have no value. And so you don't really want to partner on a project that's going to earn $10. It's not worth your time. And then, just to wrap up here, we really think about crypto and NFTs as just another way to help donors give, right? We're not promoting crypto NFTs. You're just saying, hey, if you have these, you can give them. Same way you're not promoting boat ownership when you take a boat. You're connecting folks who already have these assets. You're helping donors give, and really helping people think through the most effective way to accomplish their charitable goals, right? Which is our job collectively. And so that's that. I want to share a little bit about what we've been working on with NFTs, but also welcome you all to an event on Thursday if you're interested. We've learned a lot in the past year. So FreeWill has been helping nonprofits for about a year now, a little bit less than a year, take crypto. And crypto donors are very excited about giving, right? We've talked to a ton of them. We processed a lot of gifts. There are more crypto donors than ever. An interesting thing we learned along the way is that crypto donors are more sensitive to fees than other donors. And they can become quite upset when they learn that X% of a gift goes to a third party. Right? So this is really interesting. You never have donors that say, "What I made a donation with my credit card and Visa took 1.9%, outrageous." Right? But you see that from time to time on crypto. Sometimes it's hidden, but folks still find out. And so we didn't start this way, right? We learned that the hard way, but we made Crypto for Charity IO. This is the website, the first and only crypto platform that has 0 transaction fees. And it's actually easy to donate to more than 55,000 nonprofits, right? So anyone can use this. Any one of your donors can use this at no cost to them and no cost to you. So it's pretty cool, right? It means that if someone comes to you and says, I've got a big crypto donation, even if you have another tool, frankly, you can use this and make sure it gets 0 fees, right? There's a tipping option, right, if they want to, but it's not necessary. So that's a big innovation, and hopefully a big resource for the whole nonprofit space there. We also, by the way, make custom pages. So meaning if you want a site that says Red Cross Crypto Philanthropy, right, and it's all you as opposed to sending to this third site and lives on your site, et cetera, we make those now, and there's no transaction fee there, and there's just an annual fee that varies a little bit on size of organization. So this is what it looks like. It's cryptoforcharity.io. We can send it in the follow-up email, so you have it. But pretty simple, pretty clear. From NFTs, we learned that a lot of people choose to donate an NFT itself on top of these proceeds to make a difference and avoid taxes. So we also now accept donations of NFTs. And then what happens is we re-auction them, the proceeds get sent on. So that's really interesting. And there's a page there. So if anyone says, hey, I want to donate NFT, you can do this. Again, sort of no cost and just pretty simple and straightforward for you. What else you can do, right? So if you're a small organization, you think, I don't really want to get started with my own crypto page yet, here's some language you can use. Here's some Twitter language you can use. Obviously not going to read it all right now, but it will be in the slides for you. And so that's all there. And one thing that's really interesting about these tools is it doesn't require you to set up your own wallets. It actually functions like an instant donor advice fund, where a associated nonprofit called the FreeWill Impact Fund takes the donations, sends the tax receipts, does all the things, and just sends cash to the nonprofits. So you never end up having to actually take ownership over crypto, which means you don't have to do things like change your policies or things like that. And so that tends to be really welcome. What folks say, we got to partner with our friends at Amfar and get them up and running within 2 weeks, just before a big gala they had. And it turned out that their biggest fundraising event of the year drove tons and tons of giving in crypto. And a lot of people decided to give, potentially more, but major amounts in crypto, more than they would in cash, which was super interesting. And here's what Karen said at Amfar. She said, we appreciate the relationship building between us and FreeWill. It works so much better than off-the-shelf platforms who are working less with our clients. So that was awesome to hear. And that's just a shout out to our wonderful partner success team. We also saw that the board is super excited. We're tapping into this new generosity. It's a growth vector. And now it's really easy to standardize this into our outreach. And by the way, if you don't know Amfar, they just do amazing AIDS research and are responsible for a ton of the advances in the last few years there. Similarly, San Antonio Area Foundation, trying to respond to Uvalde, all they did was put it on their website, right? Very simple. and within days got a $25,000 crypto gift. And now they have a new major donor, which is super exciting. So that's pretty cool. Here's what they said. They said, exceeded our expectations. We picked it because it was accessible, easy to understand, fair. It was the right fit for us with the trust and expertise of FreeWill, which is so nice to hear. So thank you, Laura. I don't know if you're on the call, but really big shout out to you. So if you're interested, we work with a lot of folks here, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But just wrapping up here, we are going to send this book. Love it. It will make you smarter about investing in a short time. So strong recommend to fill out the survey, sign up for it, maybe buy it if you don't get it, as we pick 20 folks. Pretty cool. My colleague, June, I believe, is going to post the survey in the chat now. So feel free to do that as well. So book, let me come back to this. Make a note of the survey here. Also, there's a bunch of resources we put together. A quick start guide to raising crypto, a strategy memo for you in case your leadership needs this, etc. And then on Thursday, I am going to spend half an hour with anyone that wants to come to walk through the crypto tools, how they work, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, how are other organizations doing it. Feel free to just come and hang out, right? It's no pressure. But what I really like to do in these sessions is spend as much time in educational stuff as possible. And our marketing team's always like, talk more about FreeWill. Well, there's so much important stuff to cover. And so these sessions are much more about, if you're interested in partnering, how might it happen? What does it look like? What's the cost? All that stuff. So feel free to come hang out there. That allows us to really spend this hour focused on learning together, which is really fun. So that's Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Feel free to come hang there. And then generally, if you're interested in talking with our team about bequest tools or stock giving or crypto, all of this stuff is available. It tends to be a good fit for organizations with at least $1 million in annual revenue. We're focused on the US right now, so deep apologies to all of my friends in Canada. That may be coming in the future. So about 1 million threshold, or about 5,000 email supporters. And then when we've talked about this in the past, a bunch of you said, "Oh, we're a little smaller, and what about us?" We're really beginning to ask some questions internally and do some research and do some planning around what would it look like to make some of this stuff more accessible for organizations between that 400,000 or 200,000 and $1 million mark in annual contributions. And so if this is you and you're interested in having a quick conversation, we'd love your input. We'd love to hear a little bit more about what you need. Just make a note there and we'll reach out. So that would be really valuable to us. We'd love to chat to you if you're in that category, right? A little bit smaller orgs. Also doing great work. So we know that's, we get asked about that so much, and so happy to do that now. So if you're interested in learning more, fill out the survey. You can also always go out to freewill.com/nonprofits, and so check that out as well. All right, so we have a lot of questions, and I need a glass of water. So we're going to take a 30-second break while I look at the questions. If you can use this time to fill out the survey, it would be so valuable to us. Also, it's really helpful for us just to know how we did. Was this useful? What else do you want to learn about? All those things. And so if you don't mind, do that right now. I'm going to read some of the questions. And we'll go from there. All right, so let's take a couple of big questions, then we'll let everybody go a bit early, but there's some really good stuff. here. So David asks, really a thoughtful question. Do you see the bottom dropping out of NFTs? David opines that it looks a little bit like a Dutch tulip situation. Dutch, famously, the tulips in the Netherlands was one of the first sort of great speculative crazes, which was a little wild, and then the bottom dropped out there. There's definitely been some decrease in value of NFTs over the last year, and it remains to be seen. I think one of the things that's important for philanthropy is things that are currently valuable that you can immediately liquidate are worth taking, right? So let's say that NFTs are only valuable for another 2 years and they sort of drop off, which I don't expect to happen, but let's say that's true, right? The same is true with, say, at one point, Best Buy stock, Best Buy, the realtor, would have been through the roof, and it's sort of cratered more recently. If you can take it in the moment and immediately liquidate it, it's still a great thing to take. If you had to hold the NFT for 5 years, that's riskier. But anything that has a relatively fixed price or a liquid market, good things to take across the board. Many of you and most of you will be taking stock donations in some way. Any of those stocks could sort of crater. And yet the ability to take it, liquidate it, use that money for good right now is obviously the right decision. Gary says, a big portion of our demographics are female in terms of donor demographics. Do you see that shifting? And we talked about this briefly earlier, but yeah, we went from 90% to about a third, 90% male to 2/3 male in a very short time. You're starting to see that drifting. I don't think it's going to shift to 2/3 female, but I could see getting close to parity over the next 2 years. And so that seems to continue to be true. Some folks have asked about 2022 trends. What we see is that crypto tends to have leveled off and is sort of slowly picking back up speed right now. Now, I am not a perfect prognosticator of crypto. If I did, we'd be in a different job. But it doesn't, there's not a lot of chatter about sort of impending crashes or anything else. And so keeping an eye on there. A couple folks asked, is there a fee to be in the drop-down list for Crypto for Charity? The answer is no. So thank you for asking that. Glad to clarify that. See, any other big questions? Obviously, a lot of folks ask, will we get the slides and the recording? And we'll obviously send that to you after the fact. And then there are a couple other questions about environmental impact. But, I think, there are two things to note. One is Bitcoin obviously has a very large environmental impact. By taking Bitcoin donations and selling it and taking it out of circulation effectively, or pushing it on the price, you actually reduce the overall environmental impact. And the second thing is this piece we talked about, how Ethereum is actually the dominant giving vehicle, and Ethereum is now moving, to just a wildly lower energy intake. And so, it should be much better off for everybody, as well as there's been a pretty big shift to green energy. So it's up to any individual organization. I mean, most folks are taking, for instance, stock in airlines, which uses a ton of energy, or stock in shipping, or stock in meat companies, for instance. And so it's up to you all to figure out, the path forward. With that, let's pause there and folks end a little bit earlier. If you're interested in the crypto group demo on Thursday, just join us there. We'd love to see you. The next webinar is on the 27th. We're going to focus really deeply on what best-in-class stewardship looks like. So a lot of folks are saying, I'm getting a bunch of new donors. What do I do with them? How do I think about this? And so we'll pull a lot of the best research across the sphere in terms of really world-class stewardship and what that looks like, what a bunch of you all are doing, what the science says, and we'll go from there. So huge thank you to everyone who joined. If you haven't, please fill out that survey for us. But we'd love to see you both on Thursday and in 2 weeks. In general, if you have any big questions, feel free to shoot me an email at patrick@freewill.com, or, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. My last name is Schmitt, if it's not listed here. So just a big thank you again. You're pushing yourself to learn in sort of an uncomfortable area where you might be an expert in so much of philanthropy, and crypto and NFTs are totally new to you. And so being willing to jump in feet first here is really, really valuable. So big thanks. Talk to you all very soon, and have a wonderful rest of your week.